Hey legends, I hope that you're well and having a good day. Today there's been a lot of satellite images, a lot of intelligence, a lot of talk about Russia potentially preparing for a massive wave of new strikes against Ukraine. And as we've seen in the past, really like 8 weeks, these strikes targeted at civilian infrastructure as a way to draw down, I guess, the morale and the living standard of everyday Ukrainians in a way to pressure not only the Kiev government, but also Western governments to pressure them potentially into some sort of peace agreement. I don't see why else they'd be targeting this infrastructure that seems to have not much tactical value, that it is directly just influencing how civilians are living day to day. It has been said time and time again that Ukraine's energy infrastructure is absolutely on the brink of collapse and on its last legs, with over 6 million people living currently without power, many with no running water or heating, as winter's well and truly here, and the temperature plummets into the negative numbers. They're stating that over 40% of the total network has been damaged. Although with these numbers, these are Ukrainian released numbers, that when the state releases numbers, it's typically worse, and it could be significantly worse than this. Retired US Army Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who was a commander of the US Army in Europe, has said in an interview that this is about weaponizing refugees. By making Ukraine uninhabitable in the wintertime, they're potentially sending millions more Ukrainians to Europe. He continues with saying that would put pressure on the European governments in a hope that Europe in turn would pressure Kiev. He said, as the Russians are losing everywhere, their only tactic is to drag things out and hopefully obtain a more, quote, favourable solution to the Kremlin. Although a senior European Union official has said the bloc could absorb a new wave of refugees to support Ukraine, quote, as long as it takes. He continues saying, however Putin tries to break the will of the Ukrainian people, we will provide what they need. Miguel Berger, Germany's ambassador to the UK, has said that the country expects a new wave of Ukrainian refugees in the coming weeks as Putin continues targeting civilian infrastructure that will cause more of these Ukrainians who are living in places like Kiev seek to move into the EU. And I personally know people who have stayed through the entire war and at this point are starting to leave. They've been here through it all and are starting to leave due to the cold, the lack of electricity, the lack of internet, or at least the patchiness of internet, the lack of running water, and the lack of heating. So in late November, satellite images have come of the Engels 2 Air Force Base in Western Russia, showing about 20 missile-capable carrying military aircraft, primarily the Tu-160 and the Tu-95, with experts saying there's been a lot more activity on this airfield than they've seen in previous weeks, that the ground personnel are very active, fuel tankers are parked next to the long-range bombers, and numerous large boxes of ammunition and vehicles and repair materials are visible. Tu-160, also known better in NATO as its designation Blackjack, is a supersonic strategic bomber and can carry 6 Kh-55 missiles in each bay. These Blackjack aircraft, they have 2 bays, so you're talking a dozen of these Kh-55 missiles. The Kh-55 is a subsonic air-launched cruise missile with a range of up to 2,500 kilometres, although we have seen these be significantly more inaccurate than we believe they would be, although the Blackjack can also be fitted with the Kh-15P anti-radiation variant of the missile, a range of 200 to 280 kilometres estimate, and that is to take out anti-air systems radar. The other plane seen here is a Tu-95. This has 2 variants. It has an MS-6 and an MS-16 variant, of which the MS-6 variant can be equipped with 6 Kh-55 missiles. They're the ones with a 2,500 kilometre range in a rotary launcher, while the MS-16 can carry 16 Kh-55 missiles externally on hardpoints. This is a much larger aircraft. The Tu-95 can also be modified to carry Kh-101 air-launched cruise missiles with a range of 2,500 to 2,800 estimated kilometres. This airbase is located about 700 kilometres east of the Ukrainian border. I'll have a map and I'll show you about where it is. This is home to the 121st Guards Heavy Bomber Aviation Sevastopol Red Banner Regiment that has the Tu-160Ms, and the 184th Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment that has the Tu-95. Although the Engels 2 Air Force Base is Russia's sole operating location for the Tu-160 supersonic strategic bomber. Russia has used these bombers a lot in the past with long-range cruise missiles to fire on targets in Ukraine from outside of Ukraine's borders. And with that sort of range, and they're firing, from tens of thousands of feet in the air to hit targets in Ukraine, they're well outside of Ukraine's air defences from the plane itself, although that cruise missile does then come into range of the air defences, as we have seen systems shoot down Russian cruise missiles. Also, another large concern is that Ukraine's Navy released today that Russia is keeping 4 caliber cruise missile ships in the Mediterranean Sea with 76 caliber missiles on them, which the Caliber missile is one of the main types of missiles that Russia has been using against Ukraine. The Caliber cruise missile has an estimated range between 500 and 660 kilometres and has proven to be incredibly accurate in some circumstances. That said, a lot of this goes against early reporting that Russia had used, over 90% of its missile stockpiles. A few months ago, up to 3-4 months ago, people were saying, they've used almost every single one of their cruise missiles or of their long-range missiles. And that is proving not to be very true. From the Ukrainian sources only in the past couple of days, they've said they've exhausted about 50.7% of its missile arsenal, which is a lot less than the 90-95% that were being reported. The Iskander missiles, they've got 13% left apparently, and this is from, again, Ukrainian sources, that they've used 829 and there's 119 left. The Onyx missiles, they've used 74% and they've used 123 and there's 347 left. S-300s, there's 87% left. They've used 1,020, therefore remaining 6,980. Caliber missile, 37%. They've used 391 and there's 229 left, although they've been able to produce 120 since the beginning of the war. X-35 missiles, they have produced since the start of war 360. They've used 504 and there's 356 left. It's also worth mentioning that these attacks that we've seen, and if there is an upcoming large-scale attack again on Ukraine's infrastructure, it's not only these missiles being used. There's the Shahed Iranian drones that have had a massive effect against Ukrainian infrastructure targets and against legitimate military targets. But then there's also a lot of talk about Iran supplying ballistic missiles to Russia as well if these Russian stockpiles were to deplete further. So it is an interesting scenario, and of course a lot of these targets are against civil infrastructure that is putting the hurt onto the Ukrainian population. And Russia will continue to do this because, as I said earlier in the video, this could force the hand of the EU, of the West, potentially. I think that is how Russia is seeing it. They're saying that if we put these civilians, these everyday people, in such a bad scenario, will then Kiev be pushed in the direction of some sort of deal or lack of supplies, forcing into a peace deal that they may not want to go down, but from just the massive hurt and war of nutrition that this is. And this has always been what it is a war of attrition. Who can last the longest? And Russia still has the ability to produce these rockets, these missiles. From what we're seeing is they can't produce them as quickly as they're using them, but they can still produce them. And if they can, buffer that production with Iranian missiles or Iranian drones or whatever, even a lull in the battle, then they will be able to produce more. Russia does have a massive military-industrial complex. So where this leads, I don't know. But these blatant attacks against civilian infrastructure will not stop. And what the Ukrainian civilian populace is going through with the lack of running water, lack of electricity, gas lines being broken, water lines being broken, will continue. And that could potentially change the outcome of this war and, I guess, the politics behind it. But we'll continue to see, and I'll continue to update you as we go. So thank you very much. I hope you're having a great day. Of course, condemn any violence of this war or Putin's special operation in Ukraine. So look after yourselves. Cheers.